Buddy, I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee. The meeting is going to be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the meetings? I look at Councillor Mackay. Yes.
I reserve my right.
Marvellous. I'm asking just so that people at the meeting know if this might be happening. If we have the fire alarm, just remain seated. We'll help you get out of the building. We're going to do a change in the order of items tonight because I think it makes more sense to do the corporate strategy before the medium-term financial strategy, just because one follows from the other. So we'll now be taking item 17 ahead of item 16. So if you just log that in your brains as we go forward. Item number 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Oliver and I can't see anybody else missing. He doesn't have a substitute member. Oh, Councillor Nagy? No, sorry. There aren't any urgent items this evening, but the previous scope for the planning enforcement review, we've circulated that, and we're going to look at that under item 13, which is the committee work programme. So I hope that's okay with everybody. Moving us on, oh no, I can't see any visiting members either, so we'll check that one off, item 4. Moving us on to item 5, are there any disclosures by members or officers? No, can't see anyone indicating. And item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? Again, nobody there. Okay, so I move that all items be taken in public. However, if members of the committee want to discuss the information that we've got contained within the exempt appendices, which just relates to something that we looked at in the last committee, so it was the exempt appendix to item 8, the part 2 minutes of the meeting that we held on the 11th of December, we need to then move into closed session due to the likely disclosure of exempt information. But I don't think we'll need to move that, but just to make you aware, and is that agreed? Okay. Item 8 are the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 11th of December. Are there any comments on the accuracy of these minutes? Can't see anybody indicating, so I move that the part 1 and part 2 minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2024 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Lovely, thank you. I will do that in a minute. Item 9, we don't have any petitions, this evening. Item 10, we don't have any questions from local residents. And item 11, we don't have any questions from members, which moves us on to item 12, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. So again, we're on overview and scrutiny. So if you could have a look through the Cabinet Forward Plan and see if there's anything that you think this committee would like to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on. It's pages 5 to 19 in your agenda packs. Councillor Cook?
It's more really an observation, Madam Chairman. Obviously the work programme and the full plan for the Cabinet is aspirational to what the Cabinet wants to deliver. We are living in changing times, though, and I think that we will need to change with those times and reflect what the government is seeking to impose upon all of us through the devolution and local government reform. So I think there are things in the plan, and as the devolution and local government reform gets underway, I think that these sort of documents and strategies and things that we would like to do will need to be revised and reviewed in terms of what are the priorities within this that actually make sense and is deliverable in a way that makes sense for the residents of Maidstone and the borough, rather than trying to basically take strategic decisions in ahead of what will be a new strategic authority coming into place in 12 months from now, effectively. So I'm not going to oppose anything that's in here. I just wanted to make the comment that I do think that this needs to be a living document in the sense that it's something that we will need to review and look at as we go on, and be prepared to adjust and adapt as circumstances indicate it's the sensible thing to do. So I'd just like those comments recorded, please.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I had Councillor Harper, and then I've got Councillor Cannon and Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things that I've missed in this forward plan, what seems to be missing, is any reports or anything being done around about local government devolution and about local government reorganisation. I mean, it may be that I've missed it, but if not, I would have thought should be asking the Cabinet to at least look at a paper on that subject, given that as Councillor Cook mentioned, the likelihood is that next May, or May after this, we'll be electing a strategic mayor and strategic authority for the whole of Kent and Medway. And at that point, certain powers which we currently have control over will, in part or fully, be transferred to the strategic authority. So, and obviously it's not completely clear yet. All the processes. However, it does mean that in quite a lot of the items we've got here, that in a year and a bit, we won't be the relevant authority. Our role will be, presumably, whilst there is a Maidstone Council, actually implementing the policies of the Mayor, as so far as things like economic development, which we currently undertake a lot, which will be a responsibility of the Mayor, not necessarily the Borough Council. So I would have thought what's missing is some evidence of a report going up to Cabinet ASAP, since the white paper was presented in December, over a month ago, and really most of the paperwork we have before us is, and I fully understand it was all prepared prior to that, has largely been superseded, to be honest. But there is one item I would like us to perhaps look at pre-scrutiny on, which is on page number 9, and is the bottom item there, which is a Maidstone Local Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan. And my rationale for that is that as members who are on the Planning and Healthier, Stronger Strategic Planning Advisory Committee, remember that it was a fiasco when we looked at this last time in December, because it got thrown out and we asked the Cabinet member, and I know he's still waiting for a response from Kent County Council, but presumably at some point before anything goes forward to Cabinet, I think it would be sensible for it to go through the full pre-scrutiny process.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook and Councillor Harper, for your comments. I think I probably will just say a couple of things, which is that whilst we are heading headlong towards devolution, we do need to wait for the response to the Kent and Medway proposal, which is not coming till the end of January. So I think, yes, while we would hope to see some items coming forward on the forward plan as we go definitely through the next municipal year, I think it is fair for the Cabinet not to have put them on just yet, because they'd need to kind of be fortune tellers in some respect. And then the other thing I wanted to specifically pick up about the cycling and walking strategy before I go to the leader, because I can see he wants to do a comment as well, is that we're talking now which items on the forward plan we would like to have as pre-decision scrutiny. That cycling and walking strategy is coming to Cabinet, if the date is correct, tomorrow. So we wouldn't have time on this committee to do pre-decision scrutiny on that. Don't forget that as Overview and Scrutiny Committee, post-decision scrutiny is always open to us. Leader wants to make a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back on those points, thank you for your comments. You've said most of what I was going to say. We obviously don't know the decision as to whether we're on the devolution priority programme or not, and that clearly changes our approach to the forward plan and our year one actions. We have booked a session with the Local Government Association facilitators once we know whether we're on that, to think again in terms of the coming year or 2 years or whatever it is. in terms of a paper will be coming. We've instructed officers, I think it was last week, to produce something for all members and to set out our thinking on that on those issues. And in terms of the local the LC whip, it's not going to cabinet tomorrow. We've paused that, waiting because we're still waiting for feedback from Kent County Council. So feel free to request to have scrutiny, pre-decision scrutiny. Very much welcome it.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so then we have got an opportunity to do pre-decision scrutiny on the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. So I've got a proposer. Do I have a seconder for doing some pre-decision scrutiny on that item? Yeah, Councillor Wilkinson. Okay, votes in favour? Brilliant, we'll bring that one forward then. And now I've got Councillor Cannon followed by Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 8, the farming growers motion is coming back for decision at Cabinet. And I was just wondering, I'd quite like to see how that's evolved since full council. So I'd quite like to see what that is before the decision's taken. And then it is tomorrow, I think. And then so I'd like to see some pre-decision on that. If perhaps the decision can be delayed, I'm not sure how that would work. And then the other element is it was the armed forces pension. Obviously, I sort of think it's very important. The armed forces covenant between this council and the armed services is very important. So, I mean, it's probably just something we all agree on, but I'd quite like to understand that as well and make sure that it's on page, where am I? Page 10, housing benefits, war pensions policy.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cannon. So the Kent Farmers Growers and that item is on the Cabinet agenda for tomorrow, and I have had a quick flick through that report, so I would probably, for pre-decision scrutiny, maybe go to Cabinet tomorrow and speak to them. Don't forget the option for call-in is always open to this committee. So that one I can't accept. Your proposal for the residential, was it that one? Residential rent setting policy, no. Housing benefits, war pensions policy, thank you, on page 10. There's a proposal to bring that forward to overview and scrutiny. Have I got a seconder? Thank you. Votes in favour of bringing that one so we can have a quick look at it before it gets decision? Yep, we'll be bringing that one forward as well. Thank you, Councillor Cannon, and I've got Councillor Mackay.
Thank you. The vast majority of items on this paper I would hope that we proceed with, and if we don't complete them, they are adopted in any future devolved structure we're involved in. One that I initially supported, but I now suspect may be subject to review, is Maidstone House and linked decarbonisation. This is a building, Maidstone House, which we own freehold, and while we were anticipating being the tenants of that for an awfully long time, that is somewhat questionable now. And it's questionable, I believe, as to whether we should invest that amount of money. And I hope the Cabinet will think long and hard about that. It's, you know, I think Maidstone House would be difficult to sell at the best of times. When you've invested a huge few £1 million in it, it's going to be even more difficult to sell. If we go ahead with the reorganisation, and that's a big if. Well, I don't think it is a big if really, but I mean, obviously Maidstone could be the centre of West Kent, couldn't it? So, and of course, but anyway, I think I made my point more than once.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mackay. So I'm just going to check with the officer whether we would have time for that one, because that expected date of decision is the 5th of February. And we have had the first bite of the cherry of that anyway, because it came through overview and scrutiny.
That was going to come in, but we decided not to because it's not.
They've changed. Thank you, Vice Chair. Well remembered. The administration have actually changed what they're doing on that, so there is no decision that will be taken. That is just an update report. So we don't need to do any pre-decision scrutiny because I think that, like I say, that's coming as an update, and it will go to the climate transition corporate environmental services pack on the 27th of January. That one. Councillor Cook wanted to come back very quickly, and then I'm going to move on.
Yeah, just very briefly, Madam Chairman, I started by talking about the where we can be going with devolution and the local government reform. Whether we're part of the priority programme for devolution or not, actually is not going to make a huge amount of difference time-wise. I mean, I think that there are significant benefits by being in the priority programme, but that's not for us to debate this evening. But I do think that given the type of thing that Councillor Mackay was just talking about, and the whole tenure in terms of the Ford plan, the Ford plan needs to recognise the reality that whether we like it or not, local government reform is going to happen because the government have decreed it is going to happen, and devolution, and there will be a mayor come May 26, according to that programme. It's a question of how we, as Kent and the boroughs and the districts, contribute towards that process and are part of it, rather than waiting maybe 5-6 months a year and having it done unto us. So I think the comments are valid in terms, very valid in terms of a programme that reflects that and accepts that and acknowledges that, and we don't waste ratepayers' money on things that are more egotistical and political than practical, exactly as Councillor Mackay was saying in relation to Maidstone House.
I didn't describe it as that.
Okay, I think we're going to bring this item to a close. Thank you, Councillor Cook. If you could turn your microphone off. I'm not going to move on what I say on the forward plan because this does only take us up till the 8th of April. So whilst I completely agree that on the short term or the long term trajectory, we're only talking about a matter of months, I'm not going to continue to give this grace, but I'll give the grace now because I'm sure when the forward plan comes in its next iteration, we're going to start to see some of these items coming forward. We will have to as we move forward because, you know, the government's clear, we're moving either slow or fast, both of them are at a headlong fast pace. So we do need to start to do the work. I'm going to move on. So that brings us on to item 13, which is this committee's work programme. So we've been working on our Section 106 and seal review, and we've just finished that. That's on our agenda tonight. So that work is finished. We're going to move on to our planning enforcement review. And also, obviously, to keep in mind, when we start the next municipal year, we'll be looking for more things to do the deep dive work into. But what I really wanted to ask the committee tonight was whether they thought that the working group way that we did the Section 106 and seal review was a good way to do the planning enforcement one, or whether people didn't feel they were involved enough, maybe they would like to do the planning enforcement one as a whole committee. So I don't know, happy to see what everybody thinks. I've got Councillor Parfitt followed by Councillor Harper. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, my preference would be to see we do it as a whole committee. The SIL and the Section 106 one was very interested, but I felt very not excluded, that's a bit dramatic, but I didn't feel part of the discussion. Obviously we've got the report and the update, but I think this is something, especially as we were talking earlier, this is likely to be officers from Maidstone rather than lots of external bodies. So I think my preference would be that we look at this as a committee, time permitting. Thank you.
Okay, that's a proposal from Councillor Parfitt. I'm going to listen to a couple of them, then see if we've got a seconder for that, unless Councillor Harper fancies it, and you're next, and then Councillor Mackay.
I was going to suggest the opposite. I thought in terms of the seal review, given the amount of time we had to invest in it, I felt the working group um, methodology seemed to be a good way forward. Most of it was daytime meetings, and there were a lot of them, and they were timetabled in pretty well, at least once a month, and sometimes a bit more than that. Now, they weren't all, the last few haven't had to be used because we've already concluded the work. But I think if we are to try to do this in the full committee, we will have to be spending a lot of daytime extra meetings to actually do it. Because if we try to do it in our normal monthly meetings, there's not going to be the time to do that in addition to the other work the committee needs to do in its normal monthly meetings. So the working party approach, it struck me, was a better way where you had a working party, they reported back anything they discussed and then could be reconsidered at a full meeting of this. It wasn't a decision-making thing, but it just enabled the process to be handled in I think, a fairly good time. I think if we try to do it all in the main committee, we could find that we will be, what could have been done in a relatively easier method would take a long time, because we'll have to, as I say, either schedule it to be done in extra evening sessions where the council timetable is already fairly full, or in daytime meetings. And obviously there are people here who work, so they would automatically, be precluded. So the SIL methodology seemed to me to work. We've got the results of it tonight, so I would have thought it's better to stay with that type of approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got two different views. I'm Councillor Cook. Were you looking to second Councillor Parfitt's?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so that is the motion on the table, but I want to hear, I've got Councillor Mackay, I want to hear your views, and then Councillor Kahili before we go to the first vote. Councillor Mackay.
Well, mine is in the form of an apology because I was technically on the working party. I think I may have chipped in for about half an hour, and my apologies to the chair and all those on this committee. It just seemed to clash with something else. So I will abstain myself from voting on offering an opinion. I wish now I've not objected to my councillor here on my right joining in the working party, because I'm sure she would have made a very positive contribution to it. But what came out of it was very positive. Maybe because of my absence rather than in spite of it.
Sorry, just taking advice there. Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Kahili.
Thank you. I was on the working committee, and it did feel quite pressured having to find those extra meetings during the day when I work as well. For us particularly, myself, Councillor Rodwell, Councillor Oliver, it was one of us had got to do it, so I would welcome an evening. And actually I think it would be better if everybody's involved. If it is an evening, it is an evening. And we'd have to work that out with other people's work commitments. But I think having the benefit of having done that one, I think it would be beneficial for everybody to be involved and to look at it more roundly with everybody's opinions and thoughts and values coming in. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I think when we look at things as a committee, it might just be that we had an extra meeting, or if it was a meeting with a lighter agenda, we could do it then. I do think the topic we're moving on to is a bit more discreet in that it will just be Maidstone officers that we would be interviewing, and we could easily do that within the committee structure as it is, and then everyone would be involved, and then also it wouldn't take a daytime commitment. That's not to say if when we get to the next municipal year in May we might pick a more chunky item, we need to look at it again, but it might also be good because we'll be here for 4 years in this kind of like setup. It might be good to try one that way, and see what we think as a committee works best. So I've got a proposal that's been seconded on the table. Did you want to speak as the seconder, Councillor Cook, or are you happy to move to the vote? Thank you. So the proposal is that we do our next planning enforcement review within the committee structure, and we would invite the relevant officers here so that the committee could question them. Votes in favour? Votes against? Abstentions? Thank you. That's carried. We'll do the next one, this planning enforcement one, as a committee. That moves us on to item 14 of the agenda, which is our report on the Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy Review. And I'm going to hand over to our Democratic Services Officer, Cassie. She's going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. The committee elected a working group to conduct a review into Section 106 and Community Infrastructure Levy from September to December 2024. The lines of inquiry were suitability of the seal bidding process to achieve high-level infrastructure, education and highways particularly, and somewhat went into healthcare. Legal framework around Section 106 in conjunction with SIL to achieve high-level strategic infrastructure, use of Section 106 agreements and the current Section 106 funds to achieve high-level strategic infrastructure, and if SIL funding allocated to parish councils was able to be spent effectively, and if non-parish areas had equal representation and capability to access this money. A range of supporting written and verbal information was provided by the relevant officers to the working group, as detailed in minutes of the meetings which were provided to this committee as updates. On pages 5 to 6 of the report, which is pages 33 and 34 on your agenda, the recommended actions and intended outcomes are incorrect there. I just forgot to update it alongside the table, so this will be amended in the copy of the report that goes to Cabinet. That has already been picked up. However, the full draft list of recommendations and intended outcomes is already included on pages 10 to 12 in that draft report at Appendix 1 to this item, and that is pages 38 to 40 in your agenda. These were produced throughout the review. The report and recommendations needs to be considered, amended if required, and agreed to properly reflect the views of the committee before it's presented to Cabinet. So that's what you just need to discuss and agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cassie. Yeah, I think it was a really interesting item. I know certainly on the door, what we're always asked about is infrastructure. So it was good to have a bit more of a deep dive into it and just see, you know, have we been successful in getting any infrastructure? How could we look at different ways to maybe try and get better infrastructure, get more infrastructure, get bigger items, specifically get more highways items. And we interviewed everyone responsible for that, both in MBC, in KCC. We extended offers to other infrastructure providers. Unfortunately, we didn't get any schools come to speak to us, but we did really try. We sent invitations far and wide to see, why people weren't bidding, or if they thought there was a preference over the systems that they should use. So I think it was definitely a really good exercise, and I think through the questionnaire that we were kindly helped with as well, that went to parishes, it did highlight that lots of parishes were really good with spending the neighbourhood part of the SIL, but some didn't understand how to do it. Some didn't understand our website or our guidance, or they didn't have an infrastructure spending plan. They didn't know how to go about getting one. So I think hopefully the Cabinet will take on board our recommendations, like Cassie's just said, about what we think will be the best way of getting the infrastructure, some awareness pieces with parishes, and to improve our website as well to make it a bit more user friendly. But yes, this is at an end, so open it to the floor and any comments.
I'd like to either move or second the proposals in the report, and I think it's been a really useful exercise. It's highlighted the need for more information for people, but not just in the parishes, but also in the unparished, bearing in mind that about 70% of the population of the borough live in unparished areas, and as it looks like across that only 2 or 3 councils have actually accessed SIL, and we all know there's a massive amount of unaccessed neighbourhood SIL. So we do need the officers to take on board those recommendations to actually help councillors representing unparished areas to take forward and to think about the types of project they could have. I think the other thing I think is important is the idea of moving away from relying just on SIL and based on what we were told by Kent County Council of moving back to the Section 106 and what was it, the highways power for planning applications and just using SIL for relatively small items. Because the fact that they were telling us is that the money raised in Maidstone under the SIL agenda really doesn't enable them to actually take forward anything much because the amounts sitting in the pot, as it were, are too small for any scheme. And they gave, they told us how much it would cost to build a school. You're looking at tens of millions of pounds, and we've only got like £5 million unallocated still in the strategic pot. You build probably half a school, whereas if we moved over to Section 106 and then whatever it is, a 278 for the highways, we've got a far better chance of getting the really large infrastructure items we need in Maidstone. And I think at the time, I thought the SIL thing for everything, when we adopted it, seemed a really good way forward. But I think, now we've done this review, it's clear that we're being requested by our officers from KCC and elsewhere that we revert much more towards a non-reliance, if you like, on SIL.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. It was really interesting about when they compared us with different districts, they really felt that Section 106 had got them bigger bits of kit in other areas. So, yeah. Councillor Harwood was indicating.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I'd just like to thank the committee as a whole and the working group for the in-depth study they carried out, which I think is timely. We've already rehearsed the point that with devolution and local government reorganisation, the clock is ticking in terms of what we do with the amassed funds that this council holds, be it legal agreement, Section 106 or community infrastructure levy. I think what is an absolute given is that I will discuss your recommendations with the relevant officers and with cabinet colleagues, and frankly, that they are clearly beneficial. But I think potentially we need some bigger change. I personally feel that the process in terms of the big projects and the neighbourhood projects is too bureaucratic, too time consuming and too cumbersome. And I think it's true to say that I submitted the first SEAL neighbourhood bid, and it was for the St Faith's Centre, and it was quite a big project where there's been a lot of development in North Ward as was, so it was quite a significant sum, and it did help deliver much needed local infrastructure, but it took an awfully long time and it took an awful lot of hoops to jump through. And I think latterly, in the new Pendon Heath ward, I've spent my third, if you like, but my two ward colleagues haven't. And I think there's an issue, genuinely an issue there around 3-member wards, around the way that you split up the cake, and also in terms of the timing, particularly if mine are, it's a fairly homogenous board with 3 colleagues from the same political group. However, there are still, different areas of the ward where focus needs to go and so on. So I'm thinking that perhaps looking at the way that the KCC devolved budgets work and looking at the way that the old borough council devolved ward budgets worked, it was much less bureaucratic, and it was a sum allocated to an individual member, so you didn't have to have so many kind of knotty conversations around what projects are funded. So I think there's a lot to do, but hopefully we will come up with a set of recommendations which you can all look at. But I just want to again thank you for your hard work. It's much appreciated, and it was a good area of activity to shine a bright light onto, and it really does reflect that kind of parity of esteem that we need to evidence between overview and scrutiny and the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. I can't. Oh, Councillor Cook. Oh, then Councillor Keeley.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Chairman. Tony will be pleased to know I actually agree with him about the old devolved budgets and the way they operated. I thought they were been around long enough to remember them myself. Just a couple of thoughts, and it relates to how we look at planning for the future and the likes, and it's this type of things that trigger things through 106 monies. So we were talking about schools a moment ago and the cost of building a school. Well, there's different costs because so is it a one form of entry school, a two form of entry school, or a three form of entry school? And that is, and if you've got a single development in the way that our local plan anticipates, and I'll take an example that's already in place, and that is Langley Park within the Parkwood area. As those houses were developed, they got to the point where the number of housing triggered that the developer provided a primary school. When it got to a certain point, they went from a one form of entry primary school to a two form of entry primary school, which is where the school is now, and it's doing really, really well. And I think the problem that we've had historically, where we've looked at more dispersal methods of development, that's been the problem. We end up with 106 monies and no infrastructure. And whether it be the highways, whether it be the schools. So, you know, our residents and our borough is lacking because of the way that we have set about looking at forward planning. One of the concerns I have with, and as a borough councillor and a county councillor, I attend an awful lot of parish council meetings. And there are more than the occasional parish council meeting when the subject of SIL comes up, and they're sitting there saying, well, what can we spend the money on? Because if we don't spend the money, we'll have to give it back. I mean, really, you know, if they're asking for SIL money, frankly, there should be a plan in terms of what the SIL money is for and how it's deliverable, not figuring out what we're going to do with this bucket of cash once they've got it. You know, it seems to me that's getting the cart before the horse. There needs to be structure to these arrangements, and sadly, and whilst I support the encouraging the parishes to do more neighbourhood, and I certainly support the concept of widening the net in terms of representation for the future with parishes and potentially a town council. I'm not against that at all, but I do think that there needs to be a degree of common sense applied to 106 and SIL monies, which sometimes, I'm afraid at the moment, it's not. Thank you.
I'm just going to pick up a couple of points in that. So, but clearly you missed being on the working group because you would have found all this stuff out. No, so yeah, so I, yeah, I originally thought obviously Section 106 wasn't a brilliant way of doing things because whatever you collect on day one, if you go to spend it in 10 years' time, it's never enough money. However, we were proved that that was the preferred option. Now, they did it in round numbers, but they said a primary school working group, members will correct me if I'm wrong, primary school 20 million, high school or senior school was 40 million. So that's the kind of amounts, I can see nods, so that's the kind of amounts in round terms that we were looking at. SIL money, you don't have to give that back. It's Section 106 that's time limited, SIL money isn't. And picking up on some of those points with the parishes, that's why they haven't got an infrastructure spend plan, and that's where they were saying that, you know, how do they do one of those so they could show residents this is the kind of things we want to spend our neighbourhood SIL on, taking on board all of the points that some areas aren't parish. So that would be ward members, as Councillor Harwood and Councillor Harper talked about. So that was kind of things that we all delved and looked into and should be encompassed in our recommendations. I've got Councillor Kahili next.
Thank you. Actually, on consideration, I'm not sure I should voice this. I'm not sure, so I'm going to change my mind. Thank you.
No worries. So we had a proposer that our report is going forward to Cabinet, and that was Councillor Harper. I'm happy to second that proposal. I don't think I need to speak on it. We've had enough discussion. So votes in favour of our review going forward to Cabinet. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and thank everybody that gave up their time to be on the working group to get this piece of work done. That moves us on to item 15 on the agenda, which is the public sector-led garden community. This report's going to be introduced by Officer Helen Garnett. Thank you very much. Fire away.
Thank you, Chair. The public sector led garden community Heathlands was initiated in 2019 by Maidstone Borough Council, acting as land promoter, developer rather than as local planning authority. In 2021, the Council entered a joint venture with Homes England to further advance the project. Ostensibly, this was to promote Heathlands through Maidstone's local plan review, to secure it as an allocation, and then to submit outline planning applications for Heathlands too. Homes England also undertook to take on a broader role for Heathlands, and that's in terms of dealing with the land assembly from the principal landowners. The partnership with Homes England has proven robust throughout the lifespan of the joint venture, and there is a productive working relationship established between officers of both entities. The initial aim of the joint venture has been achieved in 2024, insomuch as Heathlands is now an allocation in Maidstone's adopted local plan review. Furthermore, Heathlands is the largest allocation in the local plan review and is now essential to delivering Maidstone's broader housing supply. The precursor to submitting the outline planning application would ideally be for the local planning authority to adopt the supplementary planning document for Heathlands. The joint promoters are supporting the LPA with this task and are in the process of providing them with a comprehensive evidence base to include several technical surveys. These surveys will also inform the outline planning application as well. Assuming that the SPD is adopted in late 2025, it is envisaged that the outline planning application will be submitted in 2027, with the intention being that the first homes are built by the end of 2031. The business case for Heathlands Railway Station, which is a requirement of the site policy in the local plan review, is also being advanced by the co-promoters. The report asks the committee to note the progress made to date, which has been strong, and also to approve the further financial investment in the project. Any monies that the Council invests in the project will be recovered as a top slice of any receipts generated through the onward sale of development land parcels, and this would be to the commercial development sector, assuming the project proceeds to the delivery stage. Furthermore, should the project reach this stage, the Council will have right to first refusal to acquire the envisaged 40% affordable housing on the site, as well as the 14 hectares of commercial property land too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see any. Oh, I can. Councillor Rodwell.
Can I just raise a few little things I've been thinking about? And it's actually pertaining to a recent Times article, which is about the spending on rail infrastructure could be limited to safety critical maintenance. And there's also talk of an expectation of a freeze in the spending on major new rail projects until after the next general election. And I understand that in March, the chair of the National Infrastructure Commission is going to be delivering a report to the government, and he's saying that he doesn't see any growth in rail. And this report, when published, it should, I presume, highlight the feasibility of the railway infrastructure being funded by the government. And until this is known, do we have assurance that this additional 2.5 million by the Maidstone Borough Council wouldn't become wasted in case this funding that's desperately needed for this new station does not materialise? Um, the Network Rail, will there be assurance that Network Rail will have established the new station in their forward plan before we commit to any further expenditure? Because if the government doesn't support it and Network Rail don't finance it, how can we be assured that this provision of the station will be safeguarded? And I'm bringing that to that important point in 2.21, which states that the requirement for the new railway station is now set in policy, and the scheme is mandated to deliver this by the end of phase 1. And also one other thing about transparency, and I'm referring to on page 65, the project finance, the bullet points. It would be helpful, and I don't know how feasible this is, but it would be helpful to see a detailed breakdown of what these additional costs actually are, considering the way these costs are escalating so early on in this process, and I'm presuming they will continue to do so. So I'm wondering that this shouldn't be pushed through in haste, but we need to accumulate a detailed breakdown of substantial incurred costs and a guarantee that these costs will be recoverable. And I know I'm just drawing to saying if this reaches the delivery stage, will it reach the delivery stage? And also, could there be written assurance that following the NIC's upcoming report, the station will be fully funded by the government and not become a speculative venture in the face of government's investment uncertainty? Now, for the sake of 6 to 8 weeks, could we not wait for publication of this report and any further statements from the government so we can be absolutely sure before we press ahead? Thank you.
There's a lot there. I'm going to go to Mr. Cornwall to answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In terms of the station, the benefit of the garden community approach is that it delivers the infrastructure, it's fully funded, and it sort of consumes its own smoke, if you like. So the idea is that the value created by the planning permission and the project as a whole is what generates the value to pay for the station. So yes, we need Network Rail on board to sign it off and to go through the process that's detailed in the report, but fundamentally the cost of the station is being paid for by the landowners. So, you know, all the infrastructure costs come off their would-be land receipt. So I don't think the issue that you're highlighting, personally I'm not that close to it, where Network Rail are with their immediate spending plans, but I don't think that's a consideration in the least, in all honesty. And even if it were, you know, we've got to advance the matter of the station, but it coming to fruition, you know, sits well outside of the current government's term anyway. So I think the report sort of deals with the process for getting the new station approved, and you know, ultimately, if the demand is there, and Network Rail will say yes, it can be done technically, yes, it makes sense in terms of their services, all those kind of things. It's going to be those landowners that are fundamentally paying for the station through a reduced land receipt, and that's the kind of concept of land value capture. So I would personally, my advice would be, you know, it's a good point to raise, but I don't think it's a consideration for this project. I don't think it's a reason to delay. But obviously you asked a lot more questions and in terms of breakdowns and so on, but hopefully that provides some assurance.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Harper, then Cook, then Mackay.
I think we should go ahead with supporting the recommendations in this report. Heathlands is fundamental in terms of the delivery of our local plan. I just wondered if, obviously, assuming we approve this and it's then approved by Cabinet, whether anything could be done to look at, in paragraph 219, bringing forward the outline planning application forward from summer 2026 any earlier, because I'm conscious of the fact that the government has changed the 5-year housing supply calculations, and that when we're assessed next on that, the likelihood is we will fail to meet a 5-year housing supply. At the point at which that is decided and published, then anyone can submit a planning application for any site in the borough, whether it is in the local plan or not. And whilst the local plan still clearly is in place, it would be on the authority, if we're not careful, without a 5-year housing supply, to demonstrate any proposal, so it could be from one house to 5,000 houses, has significant non-sustainability issues, which would mean that we would be able to uphold any potential refusal at a planning inquiry thing. And we see from our neighbouring authorities we're likely to be merged with in the next year or two precisely the impacts of not having local plans, which is why we did our best to get one here. So I just urge, if there's any way we can bring forward the outline planning application even a number of months, it may help us at some point in the next year or two being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing supply, because our calculations was based on it being weighted towards the end of the planning period, and the government's changed it so that it's sort of more even over a whole planning period.
Thank you.
To move the recommendations first.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Yeah, we absolutely must do everything that we can to not be in the position where we have an adopted local plan and we move into the tilted balance, because that is the worst of all worlds. I can see Helen Garnett wants to come back on that quickly, and then I'm going to Councillor Cook, then Councillor Mackay. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. The submission of the outline planning application is premised on the adoption of the supplementary planning document. So we can't submit the outline planning application until the SPD is in place. And there's actually quite a tight timeline between adoption of the SPD and submission of the outline planning application. We're looking at the chart, we're trying to squeeze as much time out of it as possible. But I think that does just emphasise how critical it is that the SPD is delivered sort of on time. It's very, very squashed, is the timeline. Thank you.
And if you might indulge me on a question from the chair, have you got all the resources and everything you need to make sure that you are like motoring ahead with those SPDs? Because conscious of what Councillor Harper said, I think that's the next part B of what he said, really.
Yeah, just to take that one, in terms of the supplementary planning document for Heathlands and indeed Lidsing and Invicta Barracks, they are the responsibility of the local planning authority to put in place. So all three promoters are, whilst they've got to support and put resources into those documents, they're the responsibility of the SPD, of the planning authority to get them in place. It's the planning authority that has to adopt them. So I do think, you know, in terms of this project, that's something to keep a close eye on, that the production of those documents is progressing in a timely manner.
Thank you. I'm sure members of the Scrutiny Committee will scrutinise effectively. Okay, I'm going to go to the leader first, Councillor Jeffrey, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Cook. Sorry for leaving you hanging there.
Very quickly, just to answer your direct point, are the resources there and the processes. We've had 3 meetings, one for each. This month we had a joint meeting last month. All the people that we think should be in the room are in the room, and there is a tight time scale which the officers are working to.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cook.
A lot of what I was going to say has already been said by Councillor Harper. I think this is actually, so I will second his motion to approve the recommendations as laid out in the papers. So I do think that to step back at this stage, and bearing in mind where we are in the budget process, to delay something like this 6 to 8 weeks is actually going to take the necessity for this money outside of the budget, and that would be um, potentially very, very dangerous. And given the level of investment that we have already put into Heathlands on behalf of our residents, and the potential to miss out on the 5-year ban supply, I think delaying this and deferring this in any way is largely being penny wise, pound foolish. And I think we need to go ahead as the officers have indicated this evening, and I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Cox just wanted to come in quickly.
Thank you. Just a quick clarification. A number being in a budget and being delayed doesn't mean the number isn't in the budget. It just means it's being phased differently. So I just wanted to make that correction.
Thank you. Did you want to come back up? No, you've got your light on. No. Councillor Mackay, thank you.
I think most of the points I was going to make have already been made, but I would say this, on a project this size, ifs and maybes will be the order of the day. And I'm absolutely delighted that our partners in this are Homes England, which is a government organisation. Network Rail is a government organisation. We're not requiring on the cooperation of Redrow, Wimpey or other builders. So this is a government-led, and it's, fortunately from what I see around me, albeit reluctantly, the majority of councils have embraced it and they've said, well, we need it. Because if we don't build the houses in Heathlands, they'll be in Marden, Staplehurst, Bearsted, you know, Bolton-on-Chelsea. Well, you can't get any more in Downsford, can you? Anyway, I made my point.
I think the reality we're facing with higher numbers is this is a wheel we never get off of. It doesn't please any of us, but it's, as we said, it's better to have an allocation because otherwise you are in tilted balance territory. So I've got a proposer and a seconder. We've got two recommendations for this. So firstly, it was that the contents of the report be noted. So is that agreed? Lovely. And then the second one is that the additional spend of 2.5 million associated with providing supplementary planning document support to the local planning authority and submission of an outline planning application be agreed. Votes in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That will go forward to Cabinet for the ultimate decision on that item. Thank you. That brings us on to item, oh no, this is where we did the switch round, sorry. Item 6, no, I am right, 17, yeah, which is the corporate strategy 2025 to 35. And this item is going to be introduced by the Leader of the Council, Councillor Jeffrey. So, Councillor Jeffrey, over to you to introduce item 17.
Excellent, thank you. Some of you may have heard this once or twice before. This is the fourth time I've given this particular speech. I'm terribly sorry if you have heard it. I'm going to praise it. We've had the discussion earlier around the world around us, shifting sands. However, a new strategy is needed to frame the work that we will be doing over the next at least 2 years, could be 3. It will underpin the policy decisions we make and the budgets that we produce, and indeed the actions that we take. We've worked up this strategy with the Local Government Association support initially through a series of workshops. We've been out to all members, we've had an all members workshop, we've had public consultation. It has been through 3 packs. It's now over in Scrutiny, it comes to Cabinet, and then it goes to Council. So hopefully, by the end of that, everybody will be completely au fait and happy with what's in it, or not happy with what's in it, but au fait with what's in it, because I'm sure not everyone will be happy. Onto the strategy itself, members will note that the key mission is putting people and the environment first. Specifically, this is not a strategy that that pushes for economic growth at any cost. It's about making sure that we support people and the environment to in social value and to improve nature and the world around us. There are 4 priorities. The first one being around improving the place which we live and making sure we have adaptations that will meet the changing climate. We've all seen what's going on around the world in terms of climate, and I believe a weather bomb is due to hit any time later this week, so we might see some interesting weather ourselves. The second priority is making sure our communities are resilient. That picks up both our core work and improving things like community cohesion and so forth. Priority 3 is quality homes, making sure that people have good homes to live in and that we improve those homes under our both under our control and help support others make improvements to theirs. And then finally is my donut, economics, the fairer economy for people and planet. How do we influence our economy going into the future to be more regenerative in terms of both social value and environmental value? Alongside the papers, with the papers, you've got our year 1 plan, and again, written pre the December white paper, and as I said a few times, we will be going back over this, but clearly there was not time between writing it, the paper coming out, and it being presented. So there will need to be some prioritisation within this, given that we are heading towards 1 or 2 years left to deliver some of this stuff in. Prioritisation is going to be essential, and we have sessions booked to do that. But at the moment, we need to get through this process so that we have something to prioritise, if you like. And then finally, the final paper in the pack on this is the public consultation, which I think probably speaks for itself. Happy to take questions. Anna, have I missed anything?
No, not at all. No, fine.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. We're going to be weather bombed? I mean, I watched Carol on the BBC Breakfast News and she just said it was wind and rain. But as I work outside, I'm now really concerned I'm about to be weather bombed on Friday. So batten down the hatches because this might be the last time you see me. Right, just a couple of items that I was just going to pick up before I open it to the floor because no one's put their hands up yet, but in a second. We still don't have your leaders forward to be confirmed, and we still haven't got a strategy map, and I was just hoping that we might have those things at this committee because they weren't ready for the previous ones. And my main bugbear, one of them, is where things just say use current resources, because I have no concept how much that is. So when we're saying enhanced interpretation of historic buildings and places, use current resources, what is the current resource for that? Is there an amount of money? Is it staff time, which also has a cost? And does that mean, if we agreed that, does that mean we could have like the biggest lit, historic building interpretation in the world? I just can't get a handle on it when it just says use current resources. I'm sorry, but I like to be pernickety and make sure we're spending all of our money wisely, and I just don't like that phrase. So I'm just going to start with that comment, and then does anybody else want to say anything on the corporate strategy? Councillor Parfitt, followed by Councillor Harper. We'll go from there.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I quite agree. The use, I think it is, we want to be transparent, and actually just saying use current resources to me is not transparent. If somebody was watching on the webcast or picking up these papers, they wouldn't have a clue what we're talking about here. So just to reiterate that point, I apologise to anybody that was in my pack, but I'm going to make the same remarks that I made in that pack. I think the annual parish conference, I think, is a waste of £5,000, and the I'm afraid, Anna, you didn't convince me with your citizens' engagement, £100,000. I think that's why we are councillors. It is our jobs to go into our communities and engage with them. And so for me, those are the things that I am most off-put by in this strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parfitt. I can't see that anyone wants to come back on that, so I'm going to move to Councillor Harper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot I think probably most of us would agree with in the overall policies. I mean, clearly some people won't agree with everything. There's one thing in particular I'm intrigued by, which is on page 146, which is third bullet point from the bottom. So it's about how do we do things. And it says ensuring the needs and rights of both people and nature are considered in decision making. Well, I can understand how we can try to ensure that the needs and rights of people in decision making are met. I'm not sure as human beings how we can assess whether the needs and the rights of nature, given what the wide scope that means, which is everything other than a human being, how can we know what their needs and rights would be? I mean, I've got a dog at home. I might be the guardian to it, whatever you might want to call it. Perhaps I should bring him along to when this is adopted at the full council, so I could ask him if he's sitting there, whether what he thinks his needs and rights are. I just don't see how, as humans, we can really assess it if we're actually logically saying that nature's rights and needs have to be considered, because we can't. We're human beings. We can consider what a human being needs. We can consider what a human being may need out of nature, but we can't ask what a vine in a vineyard or a blade of grass about to be eaten by a cow on a farm feels, or even the cow itself. Now, I'm not saying, but logically, if you look at that, how are those things going to be considered in decision making? In reality, it will be people deciding what they think nature should have, for right and wrong. And I think we should have the biodiversity strategies and so on. I think those things are incredibly important, but I think we need to be realistic and understand that it's whatever people want rather than the rights of nature, because nature is a separate thing. The point which Councillor Parfitt-Reid mentioned about the parish charter and the engagement items, I have some scepticism on, partly because when I read the report and the consultation which we undertook for this strategy, which we've got laid out before us, shows that compared to all the other authorities, I mean, we're comparing ourselves to, our response and engagement with residents on this consultation far exceeds what other local authorities have been able to do. And if I'm reading that correct, it seems that we currently do these things very well. So why would we need to think about anything to enhance what we can already do well for a cost of £105,000? I understand where the chair's coming from, because use of current resources is all well, it's good to say. However, someone might say, well, actually, if you weren't, I don't know, action on page 151, develop a strategy to champion, deliver increased access to further higher and lifelong learning in the borough, use current resources. Well, we're not an education authority, so what resources do we have, say, to further that along? Someone might say that should be left as it is, say, to Kent County Council, and whatever the current resource referred to there should be used, perhaps one of these other items or whatever. So I think it's difficult when you use things, and I can understand, because I've worked in local government and other organisations where you do use these terminologies, but we need to be aware that as a democratic body going through a period of change, or about to be enforced upon us, that some of this wording, whereas in the normal times people might not think about it, we're more likely to be scrutinised and stuff, I think, as we go forward. And I suppose my final point is that given the government is likely to respond to Kent County Council Medway Unitary Authority over their request to go on the fast track devolution to a mayor in 2026 and new local authorities in the Kent area relatively soon after that. And at the moment, the geography for us in Maidstone would appear is most likely we will be merged with Tunbridge Wells Borough Council, Tunbridge and Malling Borough Council and Sevenoaks District Council. If we're to adopt a corporate strategy to go to 2035 as opposed to say 2026, 27, we need to understand what those other three local authorities have in terms of their own corporate strategies or strategic plans, and perhaps identify the commonality between them, because it's the commonality of what those four local authorities would want to do in their approach, which is likely to take you through to 2035, as opposed to 2028, and it just goes in the bin if it's out of kilter with what those other three local authorities are doing. And we all know we are the highest, we pay the highest council tax of the four local authorities. So in terms of looking at corporate plans and strategic plans, we need to think, do we believe the other resident, so out of 500,000, 300,000 people are going to put their hands up to pay more council tax in the current circumstances? Or are they likely to reduce the council tax in Maidstone to a median, in which case a lot of this won't be deliverable because there won't be resources? So I just think when this work was done, I think it's an amiable desire and approach. I think it's been superseded by decisions the government sprung on us all in December last year, and I think if we're not careful, we could, unless we have consultation with our authorities we're likely to be amalgamated with, be setting ourselves up to start work streams which will just cease on whatever date Maidstone Borough Council is abolished and merged into the other authorities. I think the commonality of approach between the four is perhaps a starting point, given the change in the national environment at which we're working.
I can't see anyone indicating that they... Oh, Councillor Jeffrey wants to come back on a few of those points, and then I've got Councillor Field and Councillor Cook. Thank you.
Yeah, there's about a dozen points I've written down, so I thought better take a few of them now. To deal with the final one first, I think the white paper makes this strategy more important than it would be otherwise. We need that clear framework to act. If we've only got 1 or 2 years left to act in, we need a clear framework. We don't want to be sort of mucking around at the edges. We want to deliver some very key pieces of work and ensure that we have some layer of legacy for the future. And you mentioned the need for commonality between the 4 councils. It's actually 5, because Kent County Council will be part of the new authority. And actually, that new authority is likely to will certainly have a new administration that will want to set its own corporate plan. So yes, this could say 2025 to 2028, but actually it was written at a point when we're assuming 2035 would be an endpoint. So let's leave it at 2035. I can't see any point in changing it right now. I'm going to let Mr. Green come in on council tax in a minute, and I'm going to let Mrs. Collier come in on consultation, because you gave such a beautiful explanation of Citizens' Assembly last time. I want you to do it again. It was really good. In terms of the needs and rights of nature, you're absolutely right. Everything is through a human lens, but if you look back to our mission, it is about putting people and the environment first. So having something in there, particularly around needs, is, I think, essential. And rights, well, if Florida can do rights of nature, I mean, come on, anyone can, frankly. The forward will be written once it's got through to a point where it can be written, because there may be changes and there will be tweaks. I'm certain there'll be tweaks before the final bit heads off. But I didn't want to write the forward. I didn't want to put different papers to different committees because that just confuses everyone. So the forward will be written and it will say something very nice and sweet about how we're going to deliver it. But it kind of needs to be done at the end. And in terms of the phrase use of resources, when it is about repurposing current teams or refocusing teams, we've got the heritage strategy that's been reworked. The phrase use of current resources is very much an officer phrase. I kind of understand it and comfortable with it, but I understand that it might not be perfect. Can I just ask my colleagues to come in on those 2 points?
Thank you, Leader. The point about council tax, as has been explained, this was prepared before we knew about the government's devolution white paper. So we have to work on the existing starting point for Maidstone of its council tax base and its historic council tax. Clearly there will be a process of council tax equalisation if a new authority is formed covering the geography of a number of existing different districts, but really that at this stage is very speculative and I don't think we can really second guess what might happen post reorganisation.
And on Citizens Assembly, I feel Councillor Jeffrey has set me up a little bit, and I'd like to point out that I didn't convince Councillor Parfitt, but so I think I'm really thankful that the work on the consultation is recognised in terms of what we achieve at Maidstone. I think I'd hopefully, as the head of service responsible for consultation, say that we have, over a number of years, really invested in trying to get it right and make sure that our staff are trained properly to run proper consultations. But surveys are one method of consultation and they are very specific. They capture opinion of a moment in time and they are shaped, they are directed. We ask the question, we try to be as open as possible, but we do ask it in a certain way and we have to try to be succinct, and it will only capture that moment and it will only capture those views of those people who take the time to respond. And all consultation methods are flawed in their own way. The difference with something like a citizens' assembly is it is topic and themed based. It's run over a period of time with a group of residents who are as demographically representative as possible. It's about 40 to 50 residents and normally the best practice to take part. And it's gathering their views over, say, a 4 to 5 month period. You will run several events with them. You will normally incentivise their attendance and they will attend all of these events, and you will bring in specialists and experts within a topic field, so from either nationally and locally, as well as gathering the views of stakeholders, including members, to inform their understanding around a topic, to gather their views across that demographic, and in order to come up with recommendations. So it is very intensive and it's a deep dive into a topic area to gather as much information as possible, as opposed to just a snapshot question in a moment in time that is relatively uninformed, though it is the view, it is the opinion and the feeling of the resident, but these are much more intensive and they're very theme-based. So I think the recommendation from the PAC recently was that the first topic would be on violence against women and girls, which was something that really captured a lot of members in terms of an important area. And I think it was proposed that that would be a good idea for a first area because further work was needed to be done on that. If that is what we proceed with, then we will be looking to engage experts in that area, both locally and nationally, to come in and work with a group of residents to assess what do they feel about this topic and what can be done within Maidstone to improve or improve, wouldn't be the right word, to reduce the issue of violence against women and girls. How can we look to prevent that and support our residents on that topic?
Thank you. Just a couple of points from the chair. My worry with the things that are strategy and policy is that whenever you hand over a big document of work to somebody new, they generally go, thanks very much, and do their own. So I am wary of big amounts of money that's going towards like new strategies at this moment in time. However, appreciate that this was written earlier and maybe some things will be changed. I still don't think you've answered my question about current resources. Just because it's an officer term, ask them to explain it and then put the amounts in, because I want to know that. And then I'm not sure, despite that eloquent description that you've reassured me with the citizens engagement panel, we have a thing that where we talk about themes and issues and we rarely make decisions. I'm joking now. It's called JTB, and I think, you know, if we have a citizens engagement panel, my worry is, will the same people be able to go? Will it be a daytime thing? I just think, you know, quite often these things start with amazing engagement and then it wanes. And I think we see that in everything that's voluntary or has a small remuneration with it. And then the value of it does wane as well. So I'm nervous of putting that amount of money towards something like that when we have got the councillor system. Yes, Anna, come back, and then I think Mark wanted to come in, and then I've got Councillor Field, Cook, and back to Harper. Thank you.
So just a point of difference, because I think it's relevant, is the Citizens' Assembly is different from a Citizens' Engagement panel. A panel is normally assembled and is continual. A Citizens' Assembly will be selected for that one topic. So it would be engagement on that topic and on that topic only. They will disperse after that topic is closed. So the likelihood that you will hold engagement for that topic is more likely because it's intensive over a period of time. I take your point. I'm not here to convince everybody, but I just think it's an important difference in terms of sustaining energy. When people are engaged on a specific thing for a limited time and it's incentivised, you are more likely to hold attention than if it was, I agree, over a longer period of time when panels do tend to slip away.
If I can come back on the point about current resources, this was discussed between the Cabinet and senior officers in each of the cases where the phrase is used, and what it means is that we're confident that the Council has the ability in terms of the calibre of officers and experience and skills to carry out the work. Clearly it will involve some reprioritisation of what we do, but every year we look at what our priorities are as individual services and teams, and draw up a business plan for the coming year. This is setting the agenda for officers for next year, and so it can be delivered within existing resources. It's simply about making sure that the priorities are as per the plan that's set out here.
I take that on board. I think my point was rather around, I'd like to see how much it was, because as we move forward towards something like devolution, I might think on that basis of how much it was, there may be better ways to spend the money. Councillor Field, I've got next.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll start on, I just want to come back on some of the points of discussion, so I will start on use of current resources. I can understand where you're coming from. However, this is a strategy, it's not a detailed tactical plan, and as Mr. Green explains, it's an estimate of whether we need additional resources, capital or human, to those which exist within the council. It would be rather laborious, I suspect, for officers to price a per hour breakdown of what it's going to cost an officer to work on this particular project, for example, the green flagging of Brenchley Gardens, rather than another project that is in that portfolio of services. As it stands, for a strategy document like this produced by a borough council, is what any administration of any tilt would put forward as a standard phrase, I suspect. On the parish council conference, I suspect that's marked as a revenue item. I suspect most of the £5,000 is the retrieval of expenses for those people who attend. So if no one comes, presumably we make a saving. So I'm perhaps less worried about that one. On the citizen engagement point and the points raised there, I think, obviously, that being a borough councillor, getting oneself elected, etc., is important, it has merit. I don't necessarily believe that I'm the correct person to come to with every issue that you might wish to discuss. And there is, across the country at the moment, a lot of focus and scrutiny on the issue particularly of young women in public places. And I suspect there are better ways of getting the views of that demographic than saying email Councillor Field and tell him what you think. And I think given how much attention there is on that, the importance of our nighttime economy, that looking at supplementary ways of making sure that voices are heard, for me is a good idea. And I note that, I mean, that we're also looking here at transport, so it seems to be a budget allocation for things that will cover more than one issue. The last point I'd make, I suppose, I mean, we can argue about semantics, but on the issue of the rights of nature or otherwise, not to get too philosophical, but I think it would be a mistake to see humanity as outside of nature. And I think actually there's no harm in pursuing a strategy that means that we work in a more synchronous nature with the natural world around us. And I applaud, albeit likely quite modest efforts of a borough council, but I do applaud the executive's adoption of a strategy to try to achieve such a goal. I note that we're being asked tonight, do we have any amendments or do we wish to reject? Personally, I don't have any amendments to move, and I suspect I won't reject it, but I will hold fire there.
Thank you. We agree on lots of things, Councillor Field, but I cannot agree on the bit where we just write current resources, because we've been told time and time again that this links to the budget and they are interlinked. So, Councillor Cook.
At the risk of repeating some of the things that have been said, and I'll try not to, but I will be voting against the adoption of this plan, because I think the plan is not transparent. It doesn't adequately provide for what will be required in terms of a strategic plan over the next year to 2 years. And I completely agree with you, Madam Chairman, in terms of the use of current resources, because what it doesn't say is when you redeploy officers in one direction, there are things that then don't get done, and there is a cost associated with things not getting done. And frankly, Madam Chairman and members, we are going to, as an authority, going to have to do a huge amount of work to meet the timetables of our government, because they are all our government, in terms of the devolution and local government reform. Officers' time is going to be required as part of different responses that will be going from Kent, West Kent, North Kent, East Kent, etc. And that's nowhere in here at the moment. And that will need to be, and that actually should be our number one priority in the next year to 2 years. And that will have a cost associated with it as well. I think the idea of using current resources where basically you're going to reprioritise the work that officers do, when you do that, you deprioritise other work that they're already doing, and you're moving things down. That's a natural consequence of that. The officer time, especially if it's senior officers, is actually expensive. There is a cost associated with this, and in terms of the budgetary implications, that needs to be, for the sake of transparency, needs to be set out. So I'm not moving any amendments, but I will be voting against the adoption of this strategy as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you. I could see Councillor Cox indicating, so I'm going to come to you first, and then I've got Councillor Harper and then Councillor Cannon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess I've got a couple of points. The first one is a corporate strategy, whether it's this one or another one, is not delivered on a sixpence. It's a process of months and weeks and of work and a lot of intensity. At the time it was developed, local government review wasn't even a little twinkle in anybody's eyes. So it is what it is. Local government review is what it is, right? It is now. But yeah, and this plan will, of course, be tweaked accordingly, depending on what comes out when we hear more at the end of the month. The other point I wanted to make was really on the current resources point, and absolutely I get what you're saying, Madam Chairman. We're going to have a budget book. We have a budget book every year, and within that you can see, you know, the allocations of cost by each function. I think it would be wrong to break that down to headcount because, you know, there's sort of thing in the country called GDPR, which means we've got to preserve details, including what somebody is paid. But what I would say is this guiding principle here is that our business as usual activities and strategies, they're sacrosanct. They're going to happen anyway. That is just the baseline. So say that accounts for 90% of what an officer, pick your officer, does. There's always a 10% discretionary, what else they're working on, project work. And actually that's where we get the opportunity, and you know, any other administrations before us have had the opportunity to prioritise that. So I just wanted to give that reassurance, but also maybe I'm stating the obvious and you all already know that, but it's worth saying.
Thank you. Yes, come back very quickly though.
I think when you've got such a radical change that as we are now facing, and it is hugely radical, to say that a strategic plan will need tweaking, frankly, is almost laughable. Frankly, seriously, it will need an awful lot more than tweaking, such that I would personally suggest that, frankly, the strategy as it's presented, given the current circumstances, is not fit for purpose. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
It's interesting, there's one item, which is on page 149, second one down, where it does give an idea of what current resources means. Because it's 49,000, it's help residents make their homes more energy efficient, blah, blah, blah. Use current resources, i.e. £49,000. So we're not necessarily talking about small amounts of money. If that one item, where current resources are 49,000, it's all presumably already in the budget. I mean, if these others are anything of that type of situation, you know, 49,000 or 50,000 times 10 or 20 adds up to a considerable amount of money. I accept they probably won't all be, and knowing the Parks Department, I imagine, for instance, to get a green flag for Brenchley Gardens, subject to the security issues of the site and so on, may be relatively inexpensive. We've got good quality staff, we've already got a number of green flag parks in the borough, so I'd imagine that it's not a massive amount of work perhaps for that item. I don't know, I can just speculate. But I think it is important to think about the opportunity cost, because there is an opportunity cost. And whilst most of these items we're looking at using current resources for, I would on the whole support, I just want to understand what is the opportunity cost? And that's not at all clear. And it won't be particularly clear when the budget book is published, with no disrespect, because that won't be designed to tell us, by doing this, we're not doing that. Yes, the budget tells us certain areas where we're sort of making budget savings, but it's not clear those savings are necessarily, they're obviously not being redeployed into any of these areas because they're going into other budget pressures. So I am really unclear on that, and I suspect we could be talking of potentially quite a lot of opportunity costs if you add it all up. The And I do have a concern, I really have a major concern on the citizen. I think if we didn't have a Damocles sword hanging over us, a citizens panel or engagement process could well be a good way forward for Maidstone Council. If we thought we had another 10, 20 years to go, it may be a good investment in our community to help augment decision making, but we don't. We don't have that time. We will be having one person covering the whole of Kent and Medway, making all the strategic decisions, whoever the mayor is elected, for instance, and they don't need any engagement panels. They can make all the decisions, and that's coming our way in just over a year. I think, you talk about panels of 40 to 50 people. Well, you're talking of panels the size of this authority. There's 49 councillors here. I would imagine out of the 49, you can identify a good demographic spread of our communities. You could do selections from within the current 49 people who are already sitting here. I just think, with the timescale we've got, and I agree, the idea of doing the thing around the violence against women and girls is really important, but it's been pointed out it's being done in lots of other areas. Maidstone's not that special at the end of the day. It clearly isn't. It's about to be abolished. We are just one area. If there's lots of reviews being done in that topic elsewhere, why can't we get them, their topic papers, their outcomes, look at what they've suggested in other areas and see how we can adopt it here? Why spend £105,000 to reinvent the wheel, which would have been done in dozens of other councils, and it's probably the process is finished before we even get started? Because if we're looking at not, say, having an outcome on this council's approach on violence against women and girls, perhaps for another year, there could be a lot of violence against women and girls being committed in Maidstone in the time it's going to take us to get there.
Thank you. I think also what I'm sensing is that everyone's got their own viewpoints now. We've looked at the paper, we've all had discussion. I don't think anyone's changing anyone else's viewpoints. I am going to come to Councillor Cannon because he's been waiting really patiently and we haven't heard from him tonight. And then Councillor Mackay is going to do our last in the door before we shut it and go to the vote comment. And go on, Councillor Jeffrey, but let Councillor Cannon come first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to echo the comments on the community sort of assemblies, because I think we are elected to represent the community, so I don't really see the point in those, especially spending that sort of money on them. The first bullet point of the strategy I take issue with, which is the borough to be net zero by 2030. I've always understood that that sort of target was focusing on the council and its estate, but that reads like the entire borough, and I mean, I can almost guarantee that's not been at all considered or calculated, or the cost of that being calculated, because if it's the whole borough, we're talking all the businesses in the borough, all the houses in the borough, individuals' output, it's just not even being considered, and that's in 5 years' time. So I think we should have a strategy that is achievable. So that specific target just doesn't seem to make sense to me. Then I agree with the current resources points as well. I think really this strategy now needs to consider the reorganisation of local government within it, and perhaps how we can best get ourselves in a good position if we join West Kent Authority. Really, we want to think long term and how we can join that authority in the best position, and that should be guiding. That should be throughout this strategy. And then the final point I wanted to mention is the survey. I'm a fan of Yes Minister and Yes Prime Minister, and there's a famous section in that where about surveys and getting the responses you want and things like that. I'm sure other people have seen it. I do think this survey is really quite flawed. I mean, asking priorities with broad things like, do you agree with a high quality place and adapted for the future and fairer economy for people on the planet? Like, you know, priorities, really, there should be a huge list of priorities, and people should then be able to actually say what their priorities are. And if you just examine the qualitative answers on 191, it's all about roads, it's all about GP surgeries, it's all about crime. These are what people are actually writing in the free text comments in the survey, but then all the sort of data side, it's all sort of airy fairy stuff. So I just think, like, really this survey is a bit of a disgrace, and some of the actual respondents even point it out. Your questions are so vague; it is impossible to answer most of them. So your survey is inaccurate. I mean, thankfully that's got back to us, but really we should be designing surveys far better when we consult on strategy documents like this. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to go to Councillor Mackay and then give Councillor Jeffrey the last word.
To suggest that the 48, is it, or 49 councillors here are representative of the people lived in the borough of Maidstone is perverse, to say the least. Most people think we're wacky to do what we do, and on no grounds would be representative. I would leave it. What I would say is, okay, we've got to have a strategy. I understand that. We were all struck dumb in December when the government announced the changes, and everything's going to be turned upside down. But let's wait and see whether we're going to get a year or 2 years to achieve what the government wants. And then all these strategies will be reworked, I'm sure, in light of that. And I'm sure that the leaders of the 4 West Kent boroughs will get together with the CEOs and start to flesh out common ground over the next 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and we'll be faced with another strategy. So to be honest with you, I will support the adoption of this strategy only in the sense that I know that it will be obsolete in 10 days' time, or a lot of it would. There's always be motherhood and apple pie in here, but you know, we're entering a new world, and anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay, for your unusual wisdom. I'm going to go for it because in 10 days' time, we're going to get rid of it anyway. Councillor Jeffrey for the last word.
Yeah, this strategy is for January 2025 only, clearly. Thank you for that. Just so you know, myself and the leaders of the three other councils in West Kent and the chief execs, I think we've met every week now since whenever it was, mid-December, and we will continue to do so, and we're meeting tomorrow. Yeah, it is very high on that list. Just in terms of process, very quickly, the Cabinet gives its priorities to the head of paid service and the director of finance and say, this is what we want to do. And they come back and say, yes, we can do it within resources, or we need this much money. And that's what you see. So, and there is reprioritisation, but we set the priorities for them and they tell us whether or not it's going to cost us more money. Final point, and I've got to hit back on Councillor Harper. Maidstone is special. And for the new authority, whether that's West Kent, Mid Kent, or wherever we sit, and it's probably going to be West Kent, I think we need to be putting a real case to say that's going to be Greater Maidstone, not West Kent, because we are great.
Please hold back from the line, let's make Maidstone great again, because I honestly couldn't bear it. Right, that was the last point on that, and what I wanted to just tell the committee was just be reassured that all of your views have been captured by our Democratic Services Officer, Cassie, and they're going to go forward to the Cabinet for when they're making their decision. So we're going to vote for or against on this. So can I have votes in favour for the recommending of the corporate strategy? 7. And votes against? And abstentions? Thank you. That is voted in favour. And that now brings us on to item 16, which is the medium-term financial strategy 2024-2029 and savings proposals. Now, before I get this item introduced, I am, from the chair, just going to say I think local government, devolution, West Kent authorities, now can we just take that as read? That has all been discussed. I don't want any points to come forward based on that again, because the budget is the numbers of what we were just talking about. So we don't need to talk about that thing again, because we're just talking about the numbers now that sit behind the corporate strategy. So we don't need to go over all of that, otherwise it's freezing and nobody's going to get home tonight as well. And I think no new points will be raised that haven't already been very eloquently said by all of the committee. So this report, the Medium-Term Financial Strategy 2024 to 2029 Savings Proposals, is going to be introduced by the Cabinet Member for Corporate Resources. Councillor Cox, over to you.
Thank you, and I won't mention LGR or anything like it either. So this report is a key element, as the chairman just said, in the process of setting a budget for next year, 25-26. It includes a draft of the new rolling medium-term financial strategy for the coming 5 years, out to 29-30. And as things stand today, that's the last thing I'll say about LGR. Revenue, it also includes revenue budget proposals and a draft capital programme. Most of the work in this report was completed before the publication that I'm not going to mention on the 16th of December 24. So it does assume that we would continue as an independent entity for the 5-year period, and obviously that will need to be revised. Any updates to this will be brought to the relevant packs and obviously to overview and scrutiny before a final budget for 25-26 is submitted to Council on the 19th of February 25. So the medium-term financial strategy is being developed in parallel with the new corporate strategy that we've just heard about, and accordingly it reflects the 4 key priorities set out in that strategy. It also describes the constraints and context in which the corporate strategy must be delivered, including the external economic environment and the Council's own financial position. And putting it together, a prudent set of assumptions has been made for planning purposes. And you know where we are in that when we take a rearview mirror look, and also the detailed budget proposals reflect that. In terms of revenue proposals, these are described on pages 74 to 82 of the report and presented in terms of where we're making savings and where there will be costs. And those themselves are summarised in Appendix B and Appendix C, depending on the packs. So they're a breakdown of the pressures or savings, as I like to think of them, and also the growth. You'll see that the proposals include budget growth to fund new strategic initiatives. We've just spoken a lot about those. Adjustments to address budget pressures and budget savings. And taken together, the budget proposals will allow a balanced budget to be set for 25-26, given the assumptions set out here. And you all know that we have to deliver a balanced budget. In terms of draft capital programme, actually, sorry, let me just say one more thing before I move on. The base budget doesn't include medium to long-term funding that the Council has enjoyed the benefit of in the past, whether that's new homes bonus, Kent business rates, etc., because we can't rely on them. We haven't had announcements yet from central government on those, so the base budget does not include those. Instead, those will be used to support the strategic priorities we've just spoken about. If they materialise. Draft capital programme. Details of the proposed draft capital programme are on pages 89, sorry, I can't read writing, 85 to 90, and the report is summarised in Appendix D and E. It's important to note that the biggest element in the capital programme remains, we call it Quality Homes for Life, and that depends on the Council building up a housing investment fund that will permit it to subsidise affordable and social housing. The report describes on page 90 sources of one-off funding that may be used to fund the Quality Homes programme, as well as economic development and the Nature Recovery Fund. In terms of recommendation, you're asked to recommend to Cabinet the draft MTFS for 25-26 out to 29-30 as set out in here. The revenue budget proposals, also the capital strategy principles and the capital programme proposals too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a couple of comments from me before I open it up. Well, one's a question. The Medway Street car park pressure, that project's been delayed, but obviously that could be car parking spaces that make income that we really need. So I just wanted a bit of detail about, obviously that's not going to be in this year's, but are we looking forward going to hopefully get that into subsequent years?
I'll cover briefly, then ask Mark Green to hop in. I was looking at the forward plan earlier, and actually I think it's fallen off the bottom of the plan. We were looking for a paper that would come through in March, April, but obviously if things move up, other things move down. So there's a paper that's coming that's going to address Medway Street and come forward with various proposals.
Brilliant, thank you. Mr. Green?
Yes, just to clarify on Medway Street, there was a plan conceived under the previous administration to expand the car park, so that was going to generate additional income. The plan is being rethought by the current administration, so what is shown in these figures is a delay in that income coming through. Whether the income will be exactly as per the original plan depends on what the new plans for the Medway Street car park look like, but no decision's been made about those yet.
Thank you. And then my other point was just as we look at all of this in the round, I think it's just really important, and I know this was cross-party, that we get our Maidstone houses, the affordable housing, into the housing rental account so that they are ring-fenced and safeguarded for all of those things we were talking about earlier that I'm not going to go into. Does anybody else? I've got Councillor Harper and then Councillor Cannon. Thank you.
First of all, I'd just like to propose one small amendment that we add on to the recommendations, a vote of thanks to all the officers involved in producing this budget. I know they've been working on this since the summer, and probably, as far as a lot of them feel, probably for the whole year. I know myself, when I worked in local government finance, budgets, you virtually finish one and you start almost to work on the next one. So I think a vote of thanks to the officers for all the work they've done is one I'm sure everybody would agree. So I'd ask that to be added. A couple of sort of questions and comments. The budget is like all the budgets I've seen since I've been on the council, fairly prudent one where we make sure that we, live within our resources and our means, which I think is good. And I'm glad to see the council continuing to do that and transparently continuing to do that. So thank you to the new administration for continuing what's been done here from times when it's been a hung council, a majority one way or the other. I've got three questions. The first one is, what's the amount of contingency provision we have currently provided for next year's budget? Because obviously it doesn't appear in these, it will be in the detailed budget. And I'm just thinking of the questions we were discussing earlier around local government reform. If we know we've got a budget provision, contingency rather, of 100,000, 50, 200,000, whatever, and those are the typical figures I think we've had, that would probably give us some assurance that when we actually have to do some stuff around that, there is some flexibility. So it'd be useful if perhaps you could sort of give an indication of that. The other thing I was reading, obviously of all the scenarios, and just thinking of some of the sort of the macro news we've had recently coming out around things like inflation and cost of living and the sort of macro growth situation the country's facing. I just wondered what your thoughts are in terms of the scenario, the prudent scenario we're presenting here, as to whether there's likely to be any challenges arising out of that in terms of the sort of stuff we're hoping for here. And just lastly, just to support Councillor Cox, any extra one-off money we get, new homes bonus or whatever they might want to call it, it's always something different, but it's roughly extra money each year, that we put that into the housing investment fund as we have done in other years, because we're all conscious of the need for the 50,000 quid per whatever units we've got to be set aside, because if we don't, we're stuffed, aren't we? But anyway, so if perhaps on those first couple of things, so contingency and the macro situation, I just welcome the sort of assurance from the officers and cabinet member.
Councillor Cox, coming back
Yeah,
on.
sorry, thank you. So for a lot of the detail, particularly around the Housing Investment Fund and Housing Revenue Account, I'm going to ask Mark to talk about that. And the contingency point, I just really wanted to mention very quickly on the inflation point. You're right, it causes instability, but I think we're in a fortunate position that we're both a winner in that, in the fact that we've got money on deposit, and you know, that the fact we're in that enviable position many other councils aren't, and we can attract interest. If interest rates go up, we benefit from that. And obviously there'll be some other sort of reciprocal costs that, you know, then hit us, maybe cost of living or wage increases, etc. But, you know, we're fortunate that it's not just a one-way street. We actually get the benefit as well as the, whatever the opposite of a benefit is, the cost. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, dealing with your questions, Councillor Harper. So far as contingency is concerned, there's a line in the budget for in-year contingency, which is around £250,000. And then, of course, on top of that, we could, hopefully won't have to, dip into our reserves. There's a minimum reserves level of 4 million, but we're well in excess of that. With inflation, I mean, absolutely, that's a risk and affects us in a number of ways. Some of our contracts are inflation linked, so ultimately we would see increases in those. We can offset that to an extent by putting up our own fees and charges and putting up council tax to the extent that the government allows us to. I think the other impact of inflation is what it does to interest rates. We've already seen that interest rates are higher than I think the Bank of England were expecting at this stage. If they remain high, then we or a successor council would certainly have a problem funding the capital programme when our existing relatively low-cost borrowing runs out. So that would be a real challenge if interest rates remain high, if inflation remains high.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you. I've in other packs have spoken about various line items in this budget, so I will be voting against it again this evening. The one thing, and I know I'm sort of testing the chairman here slightly, but can we please not spend £1 million on software and PC replacement if the council's going to be dissolved? Because you can just imagine what would happen there. Thank you.
Don't ask me, I'm not in the administration. This is not my choice of how to spend the money. Right, your points are well made. I can't see anyone wants to come back on that. So, Councillor Mackay, thank you.
I'll be brief. It's not surprising to any of us, I'm sure, that a lot of the areas are under pressure. One that continually worries me is Lockmeadow. Now, I don't expect to want to, I think it's needed to go into detail here, but we have one key tenant at Lockmeadow, the Odeon. Without that, it's dead in the water. And I hope we have plans, alternative plans, for that complex. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
I'll ask Mark to give us the latest status on those.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. So far as the Odeon is concerned, their lease runs into the 2030s, so that business could fail, but it's fairly secure in the medium term. We've been successful in letting the 2 vacant units now that were formerly Frankie and Benny's and Feathers. So Lockmeadow is generating a return on the investment that was made on it.
Delighted to hear it. I was there before Christmas and saw the nutmeg ballet. Nutmeg, is it?
Nutcracker.
That was the one. Very nice it was. First time I've ever seen ballet.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a couple of observations and questions, really. We're looking at spending 1.65, I think, was million on Archbishop's Palace in terms of remedial work to bring it up to a standard. What are the plans currently for that? Is that realistic that we should be spending that much money on the Archbishop's Palace to try and bring a user in? And in the same vein, Madam Chairman, we are spending a large sum of money on the industrial park at Park Wood, in terms of, because it's becoming run down. That's what the report says. Over £2.5 million in terms of modernising and bringing that up to date. That actually is well utilised. I think there's a full occupancy there, and surely that money should be coming out of the profit. I think I'd like to see some balance there. And if we are having some problems with the maintaining the estate there in terms of the industrial estate, do we have alternative plans for that land going forward, or is the intention to maintain that as an industrial estate for the future, given that there are alternative places where people have ambitions to build? Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Jeffrey, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, in terms of Archbishop's Palace, that 1.6 is the plan that the previous administration, your own team, agreed, and there have been no changes to it. So if you want the details, have a chat with your colleagues. In terms of the Parkwood Industrial Estate, as you know, we own it and we have to keep it up to speed, and we get an income from it. So it's simply work to keep it going. I'm sure Mark Green would be happy to share detail with you outside of the meeting.
We're not doing that. Yes, obviously that was a project paper that went through all the packs and was agreed at the time, but I mean, everything, like we always talk about, can get changed at any time, like the Medway Street car park. So, you know. Right, I can't see anyone else indicating to speak, so the recommendations are on page 70, and the recommendations are that the Cabinet be recommended to approve the draft medium-term financial strategy for 25-26 to 29-30 set out in Appendix A, the revenue budget proposals set out in Appendix B, capital strategy principles, paragraph 4.6, capital programme proposals set out in Appendix D, that the committee notes the revenue budget proposals and the capital programme proposals for services within the remit of the other policy advisory committees set out in Appendices C and E. Can I have votes in favour? Oh, and the amendment proposed by Councillor Harper, seconded, thank you so much, Councillor Mark Nagy, that we were going to give thanks to all of the officers that were involved in producing the budget proposals. So, can I have all of that wrapped up in one motion? Can I have votes in favour? That's 7. Votes against? That's 4. That is carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and patience with this chilly building tonight. I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.